welcome, Abhishek, to this conversation about co-creating the third attractor.
Thank you,
So,
Daniela. Happy to be here.
are you familiar with the term third attractor?
Yes, I am.
Yes. Could you, in your words, define it for us and for the people that are listening, so that we have a starting point, how you would frame it, what the third attractor is, and probably what the first and the second attractors are?
I could try. I mean, I know about the attractors from Daniel
Yeah.
Schmattenberger's work, where you have surveillance and dystopias, or you have anarchies as the two possible outcomes that we could end up in because of game theoretical dynamics.
Yeah.
And third attractor represents a third possibility, right? How do we create a attractor, which in complexity theory is states which entire systems gravitate towards? So can we create or magnetize literally a third kind of point where instead of the world going into one of these two, it actually goes to this third possibility? And the whole wondering of what it is to create this third possibility, how does one do it even? What could it look like really? And how could it help us navigate the world from these two poles into something new? So that's kind of how I think of it technically. How I personally embody it is I see this as a process, Daniela. So I feel even this podcast is a part of the third attractor, right? It's a process, even one
Mm-hmm.
conversation at a time, one interaction at a time. We're slowly building an energetic field that will move the world, or at least create the possibility for the world to move to a different reality, to a different space. So I think for me, the third attractor is one, it is currently in motion. I think it is manifesting, and it's to me, it will happen. Like I am a believer somehow. I believe that the planet and all its creatures and all will manifest a third attractor. That's what I believe in, and we're all a part of that evolutionary journey of birthing it, of manifesting it, and all. Um, and yeah, I think it's going to call on to us to go beyond who we are. All around me, I hear these ideas of people saying, "Hey, this is who I am. This is how I've always been." But the third attractor requires all of us to come out of our cocoons and our shells and really fly to be something we've not been, right? So that to me is the calling of our times also. So the third attractor is almost like our generation manifesting its destiny.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. Like that's really beautiful. And I agree with everything you are saying. So I'm curious, where do you see the biggest challenges for the third attractor to actually be able to manifest? What, let's probably start with, where do we see the biggest problems right now that would need to be overcome or changed or uh, recreated in a different way so that we could travel towards a third attractor?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a bunch of problems and they're all interconnected, and we use phrases like polycrisis and metacrisis to talk about kind of the problem of all problems, the crisis of all crises. And underneath that, we also say there's a crisis of disconnection, a spiritual crisis, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
What I have been able to observe is that this particular phenomenon, the ego function that all of us have, the ego function that is the identity function, the I, the survival function, I feel in human beings it's gone out of whack, it's gone out of balance. It's like an overgrown organ, which we are now struggling to kind of rein back in. And
Yeah.
whenever and it's a very subtle process, right? So I feel what we call Moloch as kind of the typical word that gets used as in the zeitgeist of our times shows up in our beings also moment to moment, and shows up in very subtle ways. So to me, the heart of the matter is us not being able to fully be vigilant about when Moloch shows up, and us getting trapped by it again and again in different ways, right? Because it's so subtle that it's very easy to keep getting trapped. It's hard to kind of stay vigilant. And then because we get trapped by it, then everything we create outside of it is also a reflection of the same energy, the same phenomenon, the same separation, the same domination, the same aggression. And I think the subtleness of Moloch and the sneakiness almost of Moloch, right? The sneakiness of the ego function, that there is a moment where you and I are in a space of oneness and we are talking like, like siblings of this planet or like one consciousness. And then suddenly I feel this urge to impress you or to say something different and clever. And suddenly then it comes in. And then before I know it, I am pretending. And before we know it, this conversation has lost its vitality in this moment. right? And that in that tiny moment where I felt this need to be a little cleverer, a little sharper, smarter, is when that tiny window is where Moloch enters in, I feel. And then there's separation, and from that separation, disconnection to the moment. From that disconnection, everything else flows, right? So to me, the
Yeah, yeah.
subtleness and the sneakiness of this process is what is the biggest challenge. It's so slippery and it can't be solved forever. It's a moment to moment awareness that will solve it. You can't just write off and say, okay, it's solved forever. We have to be vigilant moment to moment, individually, collectively. Then we dissolve it internally, then we dissolve it outside. I think that's kind of how I would put it.
So you are pointing very much to our spiritual development, no? Like
Definitely.
the ego transcendence as the base or the foundation to create something
Yeah.
new, to create the third
Yeah.
attractor. Without ego transcendence, we are always, as you say, stuck in these ego moments, in this selfishness that separates us from the whole, and that makes us not
Yeah.
be our best also, and not give our best, because the moment we separate, we are outside, and we create
Yeah.
a cocoon instead of leaning into the shared space and the
Yeah.
shared consciousness that is always the foundation of who
Yeah.
we are together.
Yeah. I also want
And
to add a bit. Sorry, yeah, you can.
yeah, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I will also wanted to say that any third attractor that gets created out of the mind and out of the ego and out of our techno managerial solutions and our separation is eventually just going to be one more of the first two attractors, or like a similar possibility. It's not going to be a true real emergence. And when we truly talk about the spirit of the third attractor, we're literally saying it has to be of a different quality, magnitude, at a different plane. It has to be born out of a different mind or a being, right? That's when it's truly emergent and can gravitate the planet and humanity towards it. And therefore, I'm very convinced that if we try to act out of separation, act out of like these kind of solving mindsets, and basically eventually become the extensions of our own egos and Moloch, we're not really solving this. It looks like you're solving it, but you're really doing more of the same. You're just propagating the same thing under different disguises. So for a true third attractor to emerge, I feel we'll have to lean into the not knowing. We'll have to like literally fall and trust ourselves and trust each other and trust the moment for something to emerge. Till we don't let go of that, till we don't let go of the safety that the ego provides, till we don't kind of lean into each other with radical trust, a third attractor is not going to emerge.
Yeah, I totally agree. And do you see places, or yeah, places where this is already happening? Are you connected to communities where you feel like this is already happening and can grow from a core, and can grow to become bigger and infect more people, infect in a good way?
I think there is a space dimension, but there's also moment dimension, in the sense at
Mm.
what point of time in that community are we seeing the oneness being present? And in the same community, at different moments of time, one can see division being present. So I'm very mindful of, for example, saying that, oh, Auroville, for example, or Tamera, or any of these global communities, they have a lot of glimpses and they're anchored in very transpersonal ways of being. There are so many of these communities coming all over. And yet I would say that I don't feel confident saying that this community has it, because to me, it's an ongoing process of action, inquiry, oneness, catching ourselves in separation, cleaning up, going back. So it's an iterative process, this emergence of the third attractor, as I say it. So I'm mindful that I don't kind of, at least that's how I see it. So I see it emerging in a whole set of places around the world. I see it actually be born uh, in every, like I said, this conversation itself is a moment where which does something to the
Mm-hmm.
energetic field and something to kind of birth the third attractor. I'm seeing it in relationships. So I'm seeing it in individuals who kind of come alive and who've gotten it. I've seen it in conscious relationships. I've seen it in small communities. I have not yet seen it on a large scale manifest sustainably, right? So I feel like
Yeah.
the holding capacity of the planet has not yet reached a point where you can see it at a large scale. However, I feel that because all of us, like what we call the nameless tribe, right? We're all a tribe of people who are dreaming up the same dreams, are connected. And I
Yeah.
feel
Yeah.
there's a thin wrapper around the world of all of us. our relationships together form like a thin layer around the world, which is kind of encompassed on all sides. And this layer to me is very real, right? Like when we meet, we're already on it, and so this is a
Hmm.
very lived experience. That this to me, the third attractor is not so localized as much as a globalized layer around the planet of people who are all of us who are trying to share the same dream, speak the same language, move it without knowing how it'll actually happen. So yeah, so I think I would not localize it into a community. I would call it kind of the nameless tribe. That's what I kind of say. And it's based on resonance. Its recognition is energetic. Language may be different, but the underlying spirit, the larger dreams, and also the larger analysis of what's wrong is kind of shared. And I think that that's where I see, like, so if you ask me which is the community, I would say it's our nameless tribe, and you and I are a part of it.
Yeah.
Like our joint family where siblings don't meet each other. We're like siblings who just met, but we know we are a part of one big joint family.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's totally true, and you can feel it in each other that you are coming from the same
Yeah.
place,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
that's so beautiful. And my question in these conversations is more like, is it enough? Do you believe it's enough to be able to catalyze a bigger change without being kind of superstitious and say, yeah, that because me personally, for example, I don't believe in this big shift. Sometimes people are talking about big shift of consciousness will come and then the whole world will be different. I'm an evolutionary. I think it has to go the evolutionary route. We have to find pathways to a different future. That, and I agree with you. We cannot rationalize it. We cannot make it with our minds. And at the same time, there is a part of me that feels like, is it enough just the inner development and hope that more and more people will wake up to this kind of inner development? Or what do we need? You are also a little bit integrally informed, yeah, integral Wilbur. So what the question is more or less, what should we do, or can we do anything in all four quadrants to actually make the third attractor appear in four quadrants and not just in the left-hand quadrants, not just in our conscious interactions, but also has pillars in the right quadrant, infrastructure, technology, uh, whatever comes up in the right quadrants that makes it real.
Yeah. 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 I can share a bit from my own experience, Daniela. So, my organization and community, Blue Ribbon, we have chosen to locate our spiritual practice in the society. So, it is an NGO that works with young people, which solve civic complaints of local people by working with the government. And what we say is that really the revolution is not going to come only by being on the mat or only by being
Mm-hmm.
spiritual islands. It's going to come when we locate ourselves in kind of the muck of the society, the thick of the action. We
Yeah,
cannot retreat in today's times just to our own bubbles. We have to locate our bubbles within what we consider kind of the not evolved places, because the friction and the engagement is where the real possibility of emergence is. So, like Wilbur says, that there is the grow up, show up, clean up, and wake up. And I don't know
yeah,
if there is something like serve up, right? Like you have to start serving the whole also. And somehow I feel that I mean, you could say that, oh, at like, second tier stages, naturally service comes, and at yellow or at, coral,
a
you
turquoise,
naturally care for the
yeah,
whole.
a
So, like,
turquoise probably.
yeah, yeah, maybe that. And I'm saying alongside that, serving, the act of service, I think for me is not adequately. Yeah, there is something about service, the act of serving, or with other human beings. I think for me, uh, it is an important part. So I wanted to kind of point that out first. That
Mm-hmm.
the act
Mm-hmm.
of service is really important, and there's always more to do when it comes to serving and reducing suffering, right? Like there's so much
Yeah,
unavoidable suffering on the planet, and I feel sometimes that those of us who are on the mat kind of retreat within ourselves or like shrink into the upper left quadrant and kind of solve the whole problem there, right? Whereas
sure.
that's not kind of it, like you said, it's a four quadrant problem. So how do we recognize each other energetically, and how do we jam together in the upper right quadrant? To me, lower left quadrant is where the heart of the matter lies for some, like from where I
Yeah,
look, I'm like,
yeah,
this is a collective, this is the we problem, right? That individually you can get like all awakened, but when we come together is when the mess sort of happens, right? And so for me, the knot, if I have to say energetically, is lower left. Because on lower right, we are seeing that artificial intelligence is coming online and people are using it in different ways to innovate and so on. And there's conversation about tech regulation, AI ethics. There's a lot happening in the lower right. I think the lower left quadrant is where we are really stumbling. And I feel we are stumbling there simply because it's the toughest quadrant, right? It's not even visible and it's collective. So we don't know what's going on. We don't have language. We don't have rituals. We don't have stories, narratives. So it's almost like the whole tool, the lower left toolkit is not as developed as the other three are. The lower left toolkit
yeah.
is the download from the past. Yeah, sorry, you were saying something.
No, no, I agree with you. And you know, I have been a student of Andrew Cohen's, and in our lineage, we have a practice, a collective practice. You probably know about it, that we call intersubjective non-duality,
Mm,
where the goal is that in the upper left we wake up as individuals, and then we come together as awakened human beings,
yeah.
and then we start to interact from that awakened place. But I totally agree with you. There it gets more difficult because the state of waking up in oneself as an individual is much easier to kind of hold and to bask in and to enjoy than to hold it when you come together with other people and then start to have conversations, sometimes about difficult topics or difficult solutions, or try to find the right way to move forward. But for me, it starts and ends always with the awakening of the individual, and then come together in that awakened mind with other people and
Mm,
do everything to stay awake even when it gets difficult in terms of the content that
mm,
is being discussed or that is being decided about.
mm.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I just totally agree with you. Lower left is where the challenge lives.
Yeah, Daniela, I've also seen the other way being present, at least in my experience, that when individuals become parts of collectives which are vibrating at a certain level of energy and consciousness, that they experience a lift. They get
Yeah,
lifted to a different state and therefore even act as if the center of gravity shifts stage-wise also. Or that's also been our experience. And that's why sanghas are so powerful because they collectively lift the energy also. So it's like the potential to lift energy is definitely there. And the other intuition I have is that every person or people at every stage experience life and reality as if they've kind of sort of got it, as if their view is the view, right? The green meme kind of feeling, right? Like saying,
yeah, 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 yeah.
and I think we, all of us, I feel, tend to overassess our levels of development, so to speak. And I feel there is a part of us having not only to interact with each other, but interacting across the stages with respect and with with kindness. That's when the real kind of challenge is, right? Like talking within our own kind of milieu is so much easier, but going out and talking to somebody on the streets who's sweeping or preparing tea, or talking to a person in authority, for example, who's a government official and doesn't care, or talking to my own father, for example, with whom
Yeah.
I have emotional past. So to me, these interactions and these moments are the friction from which a third attractor could emerge. Right? It won't emerge, I feel, from us just being insulated in our own kind of rarefied spaces, but us acknowledging. And I'm gonna take a slight detour, but this is, I feel strongly about this. I wanna
Hmm.
articulate that. What has
Sure.
been happening as I've been engaging with integral and integral maps is that as much as we say, that higher is not better and it's earlier and later and so on, just the portrayal of the map, the articulation of the map itself implies a certain hierarchy in a lot of minds. Right. And so while Wilbur's gone out of his way to say one is not better than the other and so on, but in the integral community, I see this thrust or this pull to be second tier people, almost as if acting out that that's the place to be and that's the place to hang out. And something about us not seeing it as a, as a wheel of different levels of consciousness, but seeing it as a ladder. I feel there's something about how we are representing these stages in our head and where we are placing ourselves. And though we are not supposed to have that hierarchy, but there's something, I feel there's some stuckness there at us coming at the world as if we are better because we are at a different place in the hierarchy, rather than looking at it like a field or like a forest where there is somebody on the tree and somebody on the mountain and somebody in the valley, but it's the same forest. So I feel there is some stuckness or this green meme superiority or whatever it is that we've not fully cured. And we stick to our own views as tightly and strongly as everybody else is. And then, so there is something about this which I can't fully articulate, but I feel it is a big block that we collectively need to confront and overcome.
I totally agree with you, and I find it very interesting to look into the integral communities, community and communities, and what I perceive there is that what I would call that the old Wilberians, like the strict Wilberians that are really very good in the theoretical approaches to Wilber's integral theory, they are much more stuck in what you are describing. But then nowadays I see people emerging from that field or from different fields that have a different energy, where I feel they are naturally expressing integral consciousness, to call it like this, in how they act. I don't know if you had a chance to look into, if you have a chance to look into my conversation with Layman Pascal I had. Layman Pascal is one of the people that have this ability to do exactly what you are describing, to hold it all with so much lightness and no ladder, no fixed path to somewhere, but it's all in flux and in flow. And still you have a feeling that people like him can hold more of the complexity of the world. And that's one of the things that where I feel that's real, that integral consciousness has this ability to hold more complexity, to be less stuck. But it has to show up not by the rigidity of stages, but
Yeah.
how people express themselves, how
Yeah.
flexible they can be, as you say, with talking to different stages, to different people, to different memes, and can adapt themselves in their communication according to who they are talking with or what they are talking about.
Yeah. To that extent, I feel, Daniela, that the world hasn't really seen a truly real integral gathering, in the sense that when we say our integral gatherings and conferences, actually they are very narrow slices of the the whole. Like a truly integral conference would bring somebody who's at a survival consciousness and a magical consciousness. It would really be a true diversity, right? That's when you're like, now, if you're able to put that part of humanity together, you're really being integral, right? And I don't think
That's an
we're
interesting
anywhere.
idea, yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like while we use the label integrally, but to truly convene integrally is the kind of
Mm.
muscle that we need to build. And again, I feel locating ourselves in the society and the friction of daily life definitely builds that muscle. And not everybody needs to do it, not everybody is called to do it, but those of us who are, because the third attractor will have to include eventually everybody, even if a small group of people
Oh
with a
yeah,
consciousness are able to shift things, you'll need everybody on board to kind of also respond to it, right? So what gets created cannot be just created by one type of a mind or a brain. It has to collectively kind of manifest. Yeah. So something in that zone really feels like a possibility for all of us to explore.
totally, yeah. No, I totally agree. And it's an interesting idea to have an integral conference that actually would incorporate all the different memes. Yeah. But I was just thinking, what is what are some of the qualities you see that the third attractor would need to have to be actually attractive to a majority of people? I'm sure you have thought about that.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
are the core components and values and expressions that would be important? and attractive for people to lean in and say, oh yeah, that's the world I would want to live in.
Yeah. I can share an example actually, because that would be the best way for me to illustrate
Mm-hmm.
what we're doing. So what we're doing in Mumbai is something called Wise City, right? Making Mumbai a wise city. Now,
Mm.
Indian government has a project called Smart Cities, and it's
Yep.
smart cities about an infrastructural development, right? So everywhere there's smart
Yeah,
city.
I know about smart cities. I was working in that area in
Oh,
Switzerland
really?
when I was still working.
Yes, so we have smart cities, and we are kind of
Yeah.
saying not only smart but also wise.
Yeah.
We are not saying not smart but wise. We're saying not only smart but also wise. So not
Yeah.
negating what is existing.
Yeah.
So I think one quality definitely for the third attractor would be that it can't negate everything. It has to transcend and include. It has to say yes, it had a purpose. Smart cities have a purpose, but that's as much they
Yeah.
can. Now, when we came up with this meme of Vice City Mumbai, like let's make Mumbai a Vice City, we expanded the meme. So W was for well-being, right? And we want
Mm-hmm.
well-being in our cities. I was for inclusive. We want our cities to be inclusive. S was for
Mm-hmm.
sustainable. We want our cities to be sustainable. And E was for entrepreneurial and expressive. We want our cities filled with creativity, art, enterprise, and so on. So WISE was it also, so while WISE, the word has a meaning, it also acts like an acronym which kind of captures what people would want in like a quality of life, right? And say, hey, yeah, this, and we're hoping to create this umbrella where everybody sees that, hey, I want this, I want the inclusion, but I don't mind. In fact, I think the inclusion will lead to well-being, sustainability, and enterprise. Or somebody says, I care about sustainability because it brings well-being. So trying to create this meta frame where everybody can see themselves and say, hey, this is what I want. So I think the second is how do we create these containers where more and more people can see the obvious, right? Everybody actually wants the same things, I feel like. But how do we
Yeah.
argue
Yeah.
that, right? So that's kind of a second level. Uh, at a third level, we are all so the second quality of the attractor, therefore, has to be that everybody or a lot of people who need to make change see their interest reflected in that attractor, right? The third piece is that we are taking wise city to the young people to say, what is it to be a wise citizen? Right?
Yeah.
And we have a wise citizen quiz and a quotient, and you can answer questions and you get a wise quotient at your level. We're doing a locality level. So, what is a wise locality? And we're doing what is a
Mm.
wise city. And there is a wise city quotient, right? So, just as Bhutan has a gross national happiness index, we are saying, can we have a wise city index that looks at well?
Index. Yeah.
So again, for something to truly be attractive, it has to work at all levels because maybe somebody cares about locality, somebody cares just about them, somebody cares about the city. The government official may not be interested in being wise themselves, but maybe invested if everybody is caring about the wise city quotient of Mumbai, right? So if we
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
shift, and so for us, what we are trying to do is we're saying the most upstream thing to do is to shift the measurement. I mean, the most upstream thing to do is to kind of channelize the narrative and be anchored in the consciousness. But once all that upstream work is done in the world, if we are able to shift the agreement on what constitutes good, what is smart, and we're saying, okay, everybody wants a wise city, then you can organize citizens around wise city charters. Then you can ask leaders to kind of endorse charters. There can be wise leaders, there can be wise builders. We were looking at the issue of air pollution and we're like, builders need to change the most. So, like, wow, let's do a wise builder award because a wise builder is somebody who doesn't let his construction dust get into the city and put scaffolding. So you
Mm-hmm.
have to create incentives out of these whole invisible narratives, right? The value has to get created. It can't be a zero sum game. So the third is it has to be multi-level. Fourth is it can't be a zero sum game. It has to be an infinite game that makes everybody coming out on the other side looking good. Right. So these are, I mean, I can go on about
That's
this. I'm
very
very
interesting.
passionate, but yeah, these are some
That's
characteristics of an attractor. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and I can very much relate to it because in my last job in Switzerland, we had developed a label that was called Energy City. That's probably the translation. And a city could earn points to become an energy efficiency city. So that's very similar to what you're describing, but just for the aspect of sustainability.
Yeah.
But having this kind of frameworks where you can measure also success and you can measure how far you have gone in a city or a village or a municipality, and what can still be done, where you can improve, is a very, very interesting approach. Did you already then create kind of a tool set to measure, like to be able to say how wise is Mumbai, how wise is this area of Mumbai? Is there a
So
framework there already?
yeah, so we've done the individual and the locality level. The broad framework is that the index has to capture wellness, inclusion, sustainability, and entrepreneurial expression.
Yeah,
So we have developed this to the basic level of a locality and an individual. Now, next we'll develop it at a city level. And again, there we will develop a very rough top level thing, but eventually we'll bring in experts to actually make a really robust index, right? Because the best we can do is kind of build in the narrative, bring the ecosystem, bring young people and train them, but then the experts need to come in to kind of populate it and make it like a real thing, right? So we are also allows, so a true attractor doesn't have to go all the way. If it is truly attractive, it will attract all the experts and the advertisement people
sure.
and economics. And so, because that's how an attractor really works, you don't have to do much. You have to hold the energetic quality of that aspiration, right? And a lot of us who are trying to create attractors get caught too much either in doing or in being. But I think to me, a
Yeah,
good tractor is where you're able to hold the energy of what wants to be born and do a little bit, do whatever is bare minimum that's needed, but then let the attraction do its magic. Because if we are
yeah,
not, otherwise there's no attracting happening, right? You're evangelizing. Evangelizing is not attracting. The attractor is like tapping into natural energy, right? When you tap into nature's energy is when it's truly an attractor. Otherwise, it's just coming out of financial capital or your own charisma or network. So I feel it has to be nature powered, right? An attractor, a third attractor will be powered by natural energy, like life force.
yeah. I totally agree. And there is an aspect where I always wonder how we can achieve that, where you also need to attract decision makers. Like in your case, when you speak about
Yeah,
wise cities or wise Mumbai, at one point you need to attract some of the decision makers in a
yeah,
city or a municipality, and they have to be ignited. They have to get the spark, yeah.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
in the
absolutely.
end, you need decision power to implement things like this, even
Yeah,
if it's very attractive. If you don't have the power in the existing structures, it's
yeah.
probably much too difficult to implement, isn't it?
It is. And our own analysis of the body of the society is like, if the whole body is hurting, it doesn't mean the whole body is actually in pain. It may just be an acupressure point you need to press, and that'll release a lot of energy within the body. So also in the society, while we look at the whole society as challenged, actually, if you start looking closely and start narrowing down, there aren't as many points that actually need intervening, right? And and I'll come to why I'm saying that, and maybe even an example if required. But even when we talk about decision makers and power, there are people who believe that, oh no, we need to build a political party, we need to win elections, we need hard power, then we can change. Whereas actually, if you observe with deep stillness and sharp analysis, you can find points which, if they're hit correctly, and these points mean the right kind of well-intentioned people who have great solutions and they're able to mobilize, we will be able to take leaps, right? I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
this is about, I feel like we're not approaching all this from an adequately still mind, right? We're
Mm.
approaching it from trying to say, oh, we need to kind of boil the ocean, we need to do everything. But I don't think that's true. So, for example, just as a very small example, right? Saying that when we looked at air pollution in Mumbai, and we said one-fifth of the air pollution is the dust coming from construction projects and redevelopment. And the cost of actually reducing that just involves putting a scaffolding around the building so that the dust doesn't go into the atmosphere. And the cost of it is a fraction of the costs that the homes are being sold for, but still no builder is doing it because they want to kind of they want to get away with it. Now if we incentivize the builders not by blaming them but by calling them wise builders, right, and kind of say get the first builder on board to say and award the first builder as the wise builder and slowly trigger a positive dynamic. So what you needed
Mm-hmm.
to do
Mm-hmm.
then, and say that dynamic ripples across the city, and it can actually influence air quality by a few percentage points. So the attractor theory really is like saying, can I identify that first builder who agrees and is willing to pass on the costs or take the costs, and then make it visible for it to ripple into all the builder community, who then in turn will directly actually impact dust. Right. So it may not even need a government official, it just needs some wise builder somewhere. So I'm saying there aren't so many people who need to act in sync for solving some of these huge sticky problems. Right. Of course, you're right. At some stage, it goes into policy. At some stage, somebody has to pass. But there also, what we're discovering is there are already great policies and money committed to positive change. Like there are
Yeah,
all
yeah.
and huge money, but it's all locked up. And very often, you don't need to lobby the whole system. You need to quietly find, at least that's what we are learning, to quietly find these few spots where if you press the right buttons, and we're yet to prove this, but this is kind of our working hypothesis.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's very interesting to hear you talk like this, because in my last job in the Federal Office of Energy in Switzerland, we had money to give to projects to encourage people to build more sustainable, to build solar powered houses and things like this. And unfortunately, while we had the same excitement that you're expressing, that you want to reward people for doing the right thing, more or less, and then they will be proud and they want to do the right thing because human beings inherently want to do the right thing. That was true for a few people, and you find the enthusiasts and the pioneers, and they do it. But what I did not see happening was that it was able to go mainstream as long as the economic calculation of what needed to be done didn't add up. Like the economics and the calculation of money in the end and profit was overriding the the other motives every single time. I give you an example. I was Before that I was working for a car sharing company, a company that has cars and you can book them like Uber today, but you can drive them yourself. And in Switzerland, we were the first company that built this car sharing scheme. And one car sharing car in Switzerland took away 8 private cars from the streets. That means it reduces CO2, it reduces the carbon footprint. So it's a very good sustainability story. But we learned in this company that we couldn't sell just with the sustainability aspect. What we had to do in the end was making a cost calculation that getting rid of your private car and then take the train for longer journeys and take our mobility cars, the car sharing cars, for the shorter journeys would give you a cost benefit. And once we started to argue like this and advertise like this, we became much more successful. And people still enjoy then to say, I do something for the environment, I am behaving sustainable. But all our market research showed that the motive still came from economic thinking much more than sustainability thinking. So my question is, how do we change that? How can people learn to really think sustainable and have that as a priority motive before all the economic motives?
Yeah, I firstly I resonate with what you're saying very deeply. The way economics moves people uh, is huge. When we tried to frame different narratives in Mumbai, we said, oh, be a responsible citizen, create a better city. Versus when we said that one vote of yours is equal to 300,000 rupees of the
Ah, yeah,
budget.
yeah,
And we said,
yeah.
how do you make a 300,000 rupee decision? When you have to make a 300,000 rupee decision, you think a lot. But when it comes to voting, which is worth that much, and we made a calculation saying budget divided by number of people
That's
in Mumbai,
cool.
do you make that decision with that much thought? And people are like, no, we don't. And that certainly lights up people, right? So there is
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
definitely that whole economic case. So I kind of resonate with that. Uh, However, one part I'll say is that's not the whole problem, in the sense that Delhi air pollution, for example, right? There is the annual loss is about 50,000 crores. More than 10% of Delhi's GDP is lost every year because of pollution.
Wow.
There are the death toll that happens when this particulate matter happens is 54,000 deaths a year in Delhi can be attributed to that, which is a scary number. And the total amount
Very.
of money being spent to solve this by the government is just 1,000 crores. So
Yeah.
sometimes you have to bring out this contrast saying that would you spend just 1,000 crores when you're losing 58? To save the 58, you need to. So sometimes it's underfunding, right? Sometimes it's the contrast in our narratives that needs to come through. Sometimes the cost in the commons needs to be divided up. Like when you say, oh, one death every 10 minutes, it becomes more stark than saying 54,000 deaths. So there is
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely a narrative element along with the economic element to drive behaviors. I think that's kind of what we are learning. My own take on this is that the zeitgeist, the ruling gods of our times are the is the economics and the financial system. And for a new system, I just feel like you have to like kind of bow in front and take the blessings of the current ruling god. If you don't take those blessings, they'll not let you through. And only once you're through can you kind of, disrupt them, or you can kind of be the rebel. Because I have seen again and again that if you kind of pretend that the economics doesn't exist or try to appeal to higher motives of people and not talk economics, it just is not as effective. So the way make sense of it is really that so the deeper I make sense of it at two levels, right? At one level that this is the ruling god of our times and we need to kind of do our pay our dues at their feet, or and then kind of go at a deeper level. I feel that humanity reached this kind of economic consensus after a long struggle and journey. And I feel there's a lived memory of the struggle it took us to even arrive at a mode of exchange that allowed us to not kill each other, but, and I think there's a lived memory in our collective psyche that doesn't want to let go till it's fully sure that is it okay to let go of this model. Right now we're holding to it so tightly because we're like
Yeah.
struggling
Yeah.
for survival. And I somehow feel in our collective psyche there is such fear of the time when things got really bad, and that the whole evolution of the system, that it's not a great system, it's a horrible system, but it at least lets us live, right? And so I think till the new system doesn't calm this anxiety in our collective psyche down, till it doesn't establish itself as a worthy successor, and for everybody, not just for some of us, this system will just not let go. So the third attractor has to answer for economics in a way that I don't know, something energetic in our collective psyche needs to let go of this. And I feel only then it'll truly kind of switch, right? Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And I also feel we also have to take into account that in the different countries or regions on the globe, we are in a slightly different life cycle of how important economics is, where economics goes. Like in India, since I live here, I see that how much India is still on the uprise of economic wealth. Many people get much more wealthy, get more healthy. India is on the rise economically and with a lot of parameters. Whereas in the West, we see a kind of a stagnation and a certain disillusionment with the economic system that is probably not yet present in India. India still sees the advantages more than the disadvantages of the economic rise. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree partly in the sense, definitely the zeitgeist in India is about like make the most, make the money, it's our turn, and so on. I think what is visible to people in India, at least, and this is very limited and very anecdotal in my experience, is also how different capitals interplay, right? So, for example, social capital erosion, right? When you go after financial capital beyond a certain limit,
Mm-hmm,
your
mm-hmm.
social capital starts eroding, right? You stop
Yeah,
paying attention
exactly.
to relationships, and there is community starts getting destroyed. And so, when I try to find common ground with my father on something we could agree on, one of the things we agree on is that, yeah, our communities are kind of starting to scatter. We're not being able to cohere, right? And so, there is a cost to this whole overachievement, and there is value to moderation. Right. So there's a cultural memory I feel in India of moderation, which hasn't been stirred or evoked right now because it's still a huge colonial hangover. There is still a lot of imitation of the West and so on. That I think uh, it remains to be seen how far does this economic pursuit and this kind of energy, how much it sustains. And again, I feel one is at an individual level, there are different individuals who are at different parts of the spectrum, right? Like you need
Yeah,
some
yeah.
people who live well till you reach that point, your basic needs are not met. But then there is greed, right? So a lot of people in India are just surviving at the need level. So the greed level comes later. But yeah, the
Hmm.
people who are at the greed level, I see hope also. I see that they're seeing the limits of blind pursuit of wealth. There are people who are saying that, okay, there is something about being enough, or that what will we do in a world where there is our money has no value? Like, oh, how we'll accumulate money, but we'll enter a world where that money has no value. So their interests are also aligning in protecting the world. So yeah, so I think you're right about different stages, different regions being at different places, different psychographic people being at different stages also. And I feel a lot of this is about looking at the trade-offs between financial capital and other forms of capital. And I feel
Yeah,
in the Indian society, there is some kind of lived memory or an intuitive understanding of which will kick in, I hope, which is that the pursuit of excess needs to be limited or tempered, right? I mean, it remains to be seen. All this is speculative, and I'm an optimist.
yeah.
Yeah.
I hope you're right. I mean, Indians seems to love to get super rich as much as the West, as the people in the West love to become super rich. No, it
Yeah,
seems
the
to be.
extreme. Definitely, and maybe even more desperately so. I think the extremes of every society are definitely there. Uh,
Mm,
and yet, I feel there are some parts of the fabric of the Indian society, right? Like there is bottled water in Indian society, and yet you will find places where there are pots with water which is available for somebody to fill water, or there is water for animals where they can come and drink and
yeah,
all.
yeah,
There is still, I don't know how much we'll be able to salvage all this. But there is a culture still. There is something in the cultural soil, right? Like when you go to a vegetable vendor and buy something, they'll give you a little extra sometimes because
yeah,
that
yeah. There is a
culture,
graciousness in the
yeah,
culture
which
that
yeah,
is very
which,
beautiful. I
which
agree.
still hasn't been touched in spite of so much kind of so I think India has a way of integrating and digesting because it's a very long old culture.
Yeah.
I feel its digestive appetite exists. I believe in India's appetite, ability to digest new things and assimilate them with the existing in a way
Hmm.
that the best of what exists is also not fully lost. Somehow, yeah, I'm a optimist when it comes to the possibility of India in this era.
No, no. I really hope you're right, and there are a lot of signs that you might be right, and we'll see. It's interesting. I live here out in a village, and here it's very tribal still, and people have a very challenging life.
Yeah.
Women have
Yeah.
a very challenging life. Men have a challenging life too. It's a different world. And then to see also the span, like in India, this is for me at least. I'm coming from Switzerland. The span of different life circumstances is so much bigger.
Yeah.
Like from truly tribal, almost like 100 years ago, way of living, up to super rich,
Yeah.
technological Indians, super intelligent Indians, and there is such a huge span. And
True, but I also feel, Daniela, that the gaze with which we look at this, I think that gaze itself, there's something to turn the gaze towards the gaze itself in the sense that I think even the conceptualization of what life is about, right? Is life about maximizing A, B, or C, or is life about a human experience
yeah.
of spiritual journey? So I think that starting point itself is different. The other that the whole seasonal cycles and festivals and things that make life worthwhile, right? Observing every stage also. So not denying the suffering at all. In fact, it's immense. The suffering, the poverty is immense. It's reducing, but it's definitely there. And at the same time, I wonder about the conception of life itself and what it's about, especially because Hinduism is kind of the majority religion here, and it has a certain cosmology that gets downloaded to its people.
Hmm.
So one really wonders. It's fairly complex. So even though on one spectrum you can see that on the economic spectrum there's a spectrum, I would argue that even on the moral there is a spectrum. Where somebody really poor may have a very strong moral view on life, for example. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so I think the invitation of India is the multiplicity of looking at the same thing from so many lenses, right? Somebody financially rich may be emotionally bankrupt, and somebody poor may
Hmm.
be maybe very rich, you know. Um,
Hmm.
are one of the most interesting bhajans, devotional songs in my state language, Marathi. It says "Lahanpan Dega Deva, Mungi Sakharecha Rava." So it says that, "Oh God, may I be small and tiny, because
Mm,
to move
beautiful.
the grain of a sand requires an ant." Right?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, imagine having a bhajan that requests God to make you small and not big.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it's just
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
yeah, that big has way more pain, so make me small. So I'm like, there is space for all ways of being. It's
yeah,
truly
yeah, yeah,
integral. Like, our culture is really integral. And therefore, I also feel the third attractor, India, has a big role to play, because the culture itself is very
yeah.
integral and allows so many ways of being, and legitimizes all of them and says, okay, they're all valid.
And has this deep spiritual depth still. India is still the country that has not lost access to spirit, no? Like it's
Yeah, yeah, that's
everywhere, and that's a big, yeah, that's a big part of what is needed to go
yeah, it's
towards the further path.
it's deeply embedded in the sense that if you take a stone and kind of paint it crimson or red, like for Lord Hanuman, and like put just something there and put it at the corner of the street, you don't know, it may become a temple in like a couple of weeks, where people come and
Yeah, yeah,
the
exactly.
sacredness is in the soil, it's not in the stone, it's
Yeah,
in the culture.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, so I think the reason I'm also coming back to the third attractor is that it has to be born out of a sacredness and a spiritual sense. It can't be born
Hmm.
of analysis of the mind. It has to be birthed by bringing in all different energies together, by bringing in a sacredness for life, you know, and born out of trust that something will emerge. We can't think ourselves into it, right? We have to allow the
No.
sacredness of life to flow through us and trust that as it flows, it will have its own intelligent design.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, like this whole spider weaving the web kind of comes to me, right? Like the spider may or may not have the blueprint. It's doing its thing and a beautiful, intricate web gets formed. I think,
Hmm.
yeah, that to me is something like us being able to act like those spiders and flowing with the wind. And then when we look back, there's a beautiful web we've created.
So if you could time travel 100 years into the future and could visit like the manifestation of the third attractor, how would it look like? How do you envision the most positive outcome over the next 100 years for the world, like globally for India, but also globally? I think we cannot think country wise anymore. It's always about global global solutions in the end. No.
Yeah, I think one is, I feel evolution tends to spread on both sides, right? Like it tends to expand. The, so to speak, evil or dark side also expands, and the light side also expands. Like I feel the natural direction of life and
Mm,
chaos is multi-directional. It's not just one directional, right? So I don't see that it'll all turn one way. I feel it'll get intensified and broaden. Uh, I feel the third attractor will start with a group of people who are able to transcend their ego function, individually, collectively, moment to moment, decisively, and are able to surrender to downloading or allowing the other energies and the other intelligence to flow through us and to create from there. And that will mean that they act in intuitive, non-linear, spontaneous ways at critical points, which allow humanity to leap forward. And through those leaps, we will avert the major dangers that are on our way. Like, these dangers are intensifying, but I somehow feel their answers will not be linear. There'll be jumps, leaps,
yeah,
leap our way out of the mess we are in. We'll not like go slow. There'll be leaps. And I
yeah.
think once we are out of that, and we're able to collectively also rein in our ego function. One is individually, we need to rein it, but collectively also rein it in. The outside world, which is currently created in the image of our insecurities and our ego, will also begin to melt and become more beautiful, become
Hmm.
more kind of richer, more beautiful, more aesthetic, more self-contained, more good, uh, more true, right? Because right now I feel the outer world is just reflecting our inner states, and these are all
Hmm.
fossilized
Hmm.
structures inside which are showing outside. And as our inner states kind of grow and become more beautiful, we'll manifest that beauty, that goodness on the outside. So 100 years into the future, I don't think quote unquote evil won't exist. There'll always be one side that thinks there is another side. I hope we're able to hold these paradoxes. I hope we're able to see the beauty of the opposites. I hope
Hmm.
to dance together with a large diversity and kind of be not locked in the funny zero sum game that we find ourselves
Hmm.
into an infinite game with life, where we're out
Hmm.
there, we're exploring, we're growing, I think there's so much out there and we're fighting with each other try over like a
Yeah,
fixed.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Do you think technology will be part of the solution or part of the
definitely,
problem?
definitely.
Yes.
I am a little bit of a transhumanist techno optimist, so I definitely
Are
think.
you? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Speak
I
about it
mean,
a little bit.
I feel humanity is building new organs right now. I feel like internet plus AI together is a new collective organ that we have. And
Hmm.
I feel when a baby, before a baby knows its hand is its own hand, the hand is moving, and the baby is still not figured out that this is my hand, which I can move. I think
Yeah.
right now the organ is at such an early stage that it seems to have a life of its own, and we are scared. What if it kills us, and so on. Uh, I feel at some stage we'll get some kind of uh, a relationship with that organ, and that organ
Hmm.
will let us sense and intuit at a whole new level. I really feel we've collectively built an organ. Internet was the first stage of that. AI is the next stage, and I know what will be the next stage. But it's a organ for humanity that will help us see things which are not visible and craft out pathways which are not currently available to us. So it's almost like through our struggle and through everything, we have built a new faculty. We don't know how to use it. We can, if it's co-opted by the same ego, it will create more harm than good. But if there is a bunch of light warriors, if there is evolution in that sense also, then that consciousness can leverage this to power ourselves out of where we are as well.
Hmm.
So I
But
do.
as a tool, would you agree it has to be a tool, or are you going as far as seeing it as becoming sentient?
I'm seeing it one as a tool. I'm saying it has to be wielded by people with a certain level of consciousness.
Yes. Yeah.
And other, I also think, for example, that when fire got invented for humanity, what did it do to the collective psyche of humanity? Maybe it built a lot of security in the collective psyche, right? That now we don't have to be scared of being eaten or going starving because now we have fire.
Hmm.
So when
Hmm.
something happens in the lower right quadrant, the upper left also gets impacted in some way, right? And I think, in fact, when this is happening in the lower right quadrant, the lower left will get impacted because
Hmm.
collectively we are being confronted with asking ourselves, what is it to be human? What is it to coexist with this intelligence? What is it to integrate with it? What is it to negotiate with it? So I don't have
Hmm.
answers, but I definitely see a churn that extends way beyond just looking at it like a tool. I see it impacting our collective consciousness for good and for the bad, right? It is softening our brains, and people are just doing reels which are fed by algorithms and going, first thing they're going is going to chat GPT for answers. So it's softening. It's not healthy at all. I'm not saying it's healthy at all.
Hmm. Hmm.
But some part in me, which is the forever optimist, believes that the existence of this on the outside will give us capacity to sense and see things which were invisible, particularly in the lower left quadrant. And I think one of the best applications for AI would be if it can help solve the problem of coexistence, right? Which is our most ancient problem. So I think if we deploy the latest technology on the most ancient problem, we may.
That that's surprising to me that you have hopes in the lower left, because for me it's more like I very much see AI having a role in the right hand quadrants, just to analyze, to see patterns, to, like in medicine, for example, I see like the whole recognition of patterns in medical diagnosis and this kind of things. I have never thought about AI being able to help us in the left quadrants. That's an interesting take. I will have to think about that.
Yeah, yeah.
Why do you think there is a potential there for the lower left quadrant? Why would AI have more intelligence there to help us to solve those coming together problems?
I feel, lower left, the access we have to data is very local access, right? Local access is a very here and now. intuitive felt
Mm-hmm.
access. So all of us are spatial creatures, spatial, like of space, responding to what's our immediate surroundings,
Mm-hmm.
our immediate people, which works fine for a small group. But the moment we organize ourselves in larger and larger groups, we what is happening in the rest of the group is beyond our perception. It's beyond our
Mm-hmm.
visual perception. It's beyond us being able to grasp it locally. Right. But
Mm-hmm.
let's take a simple example of a Mentimeter, right? A Mentimeter run with 100 people. Let's them see what they're thinking together. What's the group mind doing? It's a one-time picture of the group mind which nobody had access to. Right. So Mentimeter is
Mm-hmm.
a simple use case of how a group mind can be visible to itself. Now, what I feel AI will be able to do is to allow us in real time to see how our patterns of coherence are emerging, increasing, decreasing. Like, I mean, just
Mm.
as a thought experiment, if there are 100 people in a room talking and there is AI agents listening to everything, transcribing and seeing what levels of coherence are there in the room, and the room can look back and say that, hey, we're not cohering, for example. It's like a real temperature of the room is being reflected back to the room. And I don't know, in some ways, I feel that intelligence
Interesting.
reflected back to the group may let the
Yeah.
group modulate its behavior. And as
Yeah.
it modulates, it has a feedback loop. The feedback loop is not just an individual feedback loop, it's a group level feedback loop of how we are doing in real time. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that feedback loop can actually help a group slowly rise. Like, oh, when I start shouting at you, it starts showing a red spot there. But if I am warm with you, it starts showing a green spot. And I don't know, there's something about that
Yeah.
possibility.
Yeah. Direct feedback of what is happening. Yeah.
But a
That's
feedback loop
very.
at a collective level, right? So right now we have
Yeah. Yeah.
individual feedback loop, which are those like you put those rods and you get. But I'm saying a collective feedback loop created by AI could actually allow any group to start cohering. And yeah, I just feel, I mean, like I said, I'm a optimist, right? So I think
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
there is a case for real-time coherence creation in large groups of people. They can cohere
Yeah. That's
in ways they
interesting.
would never have cohered.
And probably also in finding new ways of executing democratic rights or voting or
Absolutely, absolutely.
actually, yeah, collecting the collective wisdom with more intelligence than just one vote,
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. And
one person, one vote.
some of my work, which I do with NGOs around culture building, is called Wisdom Tree. And in Wisdom Tree, we help NGOs build their culture and leadership for the future. And
Mm-hmm.
it is really about tapping into the collective wisdom. And we're quite excited about what's happening in the tech world.
Mm.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
that's very interesting.
yeah.
Great. So if somebody is interested in this kind of work of co-creating a third attractor, what would you advise somebody how to start, where to start, how to think about it, where to connect?
I have reached my kind of sense is that relationships are the response and community is the ground. I think that's kind of
Mm,
what I have figured out that where
yeah.
to start in relationship, because in a relationship you discover a deeper truth. In relationship you're able to connect and allow a deeper intelligence to get evoked. And
Yeah.
in relationship is where you really are able to examine your own kind of biases and blind spots and the moloch. So relationships, and then not locating those relationships in like kind of, I don't know, romantic honeymoon spots or in some
Hmm.
of, but
Hmm.
locating them in the community,
Yeah,
in
yeah.
the world. Because without
Sangha.
that ground, the energetic gifts of that relationship will not percolate into the world. So
Yeah.
the community, so the practice of communities, the relational practice of communities will allow sense making to happen. That sense making will allow coordinated action. That coordinated action will allow complex responses which are not currently available to challenges which can't be solved by any one person. So if I have to go back saying metacrisis, polycrisis need a complex, multifaceted response, which needs a coordination, which needs sense making and value alignment, which needs communities of coherence, which needs relationships which deeply cohere with each other. And so,
Hmm.
me
Hmm.
at least, the work is like deeply relational when we're working. And I'm like, can we deeply commune even with a handful of people? I feel like
Yeah,
some of
yeah.
the biggest experts also privately confess to the fact saying that, you guys have a sangha where you all are being able to do this deep stuff. They're like, we don't have it. When three of us come on a podcast, we're constantly like elbowing each other and one-upping each other, and we can't even dialogue peacefully without interrupting each other. So I'm like, if that is the stage where we are at, then I think the work begins at that micro level, right?
Yeah.
Because again, solo, I think just doing Vipassana or just a self-reflective process is not adequate for Malak
No.
to first, second, third, and fourth person practices, where by fourth person I mean shadow practices. So a community located in relationships located in the community are my kind of, that's how the third attractor will emerge.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I also like how you again and again speak about coherence. And I feel like co-creating the third attractor has a lot to do with creating coherence in where we go
Absolutely.
without fixing it. It's not about
Yeah.
fixing certain rules or it's more like you cohere in a deep way
Yes.
towards the future. No, like it's
Yeah.
this one consciousness leaning into the future and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then respond to what is there
Yeah.
as good as we can. Yeah,
Absolutely. And I think any attempt by the mind in the wrong place, like of course the brain has a place, the left brain has a place, all of it has a place. It has to be led by intuition. I feel it has to be led
mm-hmm.
by an integration of left and right brain, and
Yeah,
integration of masculine and the feminine. It can't, yeah, it has to truly be a wholesome coherence. And that's when we're really that's when we're really talking and manifesting it.
yeah. No, that's beautiful.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Is there anything else that you wanted to add? We touched upon a lot.
Yes. So I want to add that, I mean, I feel the third attractor is well on its way, and we are all a part
Mm-hmm.
of it. And we have the privilege of actually it manifesting through us in our lifetime.
Yeah,
And I I feel this need to appeal to myself and to all of us to be very watchful of our thoughts and our hopes and our cynicism and our aspiration, because there is a part of each of us that doesn't want to be disappointed, that wants to be very cynical and wants to say
mm-hmm.
it's not going to work out.
Mm-hmm.
And that part has a place, of course. And at the same time, I feel the energetic field also responds to intentions. The
Mm-hmm.
energetic field that is is also going to respond to our readiness. I
Mm-hmm.
somehow feel that in our collective psyche, there's a feeling that we don't deserve this yet, and we want to punish ourselves for the wrong we've done, and we need to have this suffering. I know there's something in this collective psyche that is not allowing, that is just not allowing conditions to ripen for a third attractor to
Yeah,
manifest. It's like almost like we are our own resistance, we're our own biggest resistance. And if only we're able to be like deeply hopeful, not in a delusional way, right? Hopeful in a way that we acknowledge the cynicism, we acknowledge the difficulty of the moment, but we also know that every intention and every thought adds to the energetic field. And it's our responsibility to sow the right seeds in the energetic field, and every positive intention, every hopeful word is a seed in that energetic field that will bloom, right? And we all have to be very watchful of what we are planting in the energetic field. uh, it,
totally.
yeah, yeah, so I think
And
that's
and as you said many times, it's in the end the magic happens beyond the ego. Like when we take it back to our spiritual development, it's all happening beyond the ego. That it's what you are so beautifully describing is the space that in our teaching we call the authentic self. We want to be beyond the ego. We want to be aligned with the authentic self, and that's where we are open enough to just respond to life with the positivity that is inherent in the life process. It's inherent in the evolutionary impulse. This absolute positivity that kind of guides the way and but needs our full attention and intention and our leaning into the future, but from a non-egoic place.
absolutely yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty much, I mean, we can keep riffing on this for a long time, but for now I think I've said most of what I
Yeah.
wanted to share. Yeah.
Thank you so much. It was a real joy to talk to you.
Thank you, Daniela. Thank
Thank you.
you for